Hello one and all. This is my recap and review of Soma Spider So What? Volume 16. The final freaking volume. And I've gotta say, it feels really weird to make this video. I mean, I watched the anime about 2 years ago, basically on a whim, and since then I've made a video covering every single volume of this series. Oh God above, it has been a wild ride, and this volume is no exception, as basically every major character got their own chapter, just like back in volume 11, with the great human-demon war. And this certainly does feel appropriate. I mean, I've often said this is a series about varying perspective. Besides Pontiff'S, there are really no villains, with even D being a pretty neutral character if you think about it, and instead each character is fighting to protect whatever is truly important to them, whatever matters most. And so it makes a lot of sense for this final volume to show everyone's reaction to basically the end of the world and their own debate about the best way to save it. Nobody's really in the right, they're just doing what they feel is the lesser of two evils. And we start off with Ariel recapping the entire situation to the Demon Army and White's classmates, explaining that her plan is to wipe out the system and half of humanity. Though without the system, monsters will probably go insane and might end up wiping out the remaining half. So yeah, not the most convincing speech in the world. And she doesn't even mention the worst parts. Firstly, the people who die when the system collapses, they won't just die. Their souls will literally be obliterated, meaning they will never again be reborn. And secondly, the goddess Ariel, who Ariel is fighting so hard to save, is already well past the point of saving and will die almost immediately after being cut off from the system. So yeah, Ariel really does seem like the villain here, and could probably give D a run for her money, especially since D is being quite helpful this volume, and is willing to answer Black and White's questions. And I do just absolutely love this scene, because it really emphasizes one of the things this series does best. Plot twists don't just come out of nowhere and hit you over the head. They are all heavily foreshadowed if you know to look for them. For example, the attack that wiped out the class back in Japan. Yeah, that probably should have wiped Japan completely off the map, given that it was an attack designed to kill a freaking god. Heck, it probably should have blown up the entire planet. But here's the reveal that didn't, because D absorbed most of the energy and then used that energy to install taboo in the entire population, which then leads to the second twist: a lot more people are going to die if White wins. Now, this reveal isn't, hugely groundbreaking, but it should have been obvious that a new skill would increase the risk of soul collapse. I probably should have realized that, but I was just, fully and completely distracted by the overwhelming madness of the world quest. Oh, I loved it. Anyway, though, then the fight between Black and White gets even crazier, with White describing it as an overblown battle manga, as Black starts throwing buildings, actual skyscrapers at White, and she bounces them back with her webbings. Oh God, I love you, White. You are so insane. And even though Black is way stronger than her, and is continuing to grow stronger every second through the power of prayer, praise Jesus! She knows that she'll win if she just lasts long enough and puts her full focus on this battle, meaning that for now, she just needs to trust her friends. And her difficulty not only doing that, but even just saying it is so absolutely adorable. God, I love White. But then we flash over to Shun, the far less interesting protagonist who is powered solely by plot armor, and he decides to go chat with the Pontiff since the old man clearly knows what's up. And when they arrive, they see he's in the midst of a meeting with the ancient dragon chiefs. And then we learn the Pontiff's plan, and it is somehow way more evil than White's, because he knows there's not enough energy in the system to save the world, so he's going to throw everyone he can to the labyrinth so they'll die, then start a holy war to get his entire church killed, and then kill Black, White, and Sariel to sacrifice their energy to the system, and that might save the world. Holy mother of God, that's terrifying. Absolutely freaking terrifying. Too terrifying for our good boy Shun to join his side, so he decides to look for another path. And even though he has absolutely no idea what the path might be, or where to even start looking for it, he's still an isekai protagonist, so his words alone are enough to convince Huiven, Nia, and Reese to join his side. Huzzah! And while the logic here isn't all that sound, I do absolutely freaking love Huiven'S Return, as he's basically the closest we've seen White come to being attracted to anyone in this series. I mean, she was pretty impressed by him getting mad at Pontiff'S for her sake. I won't lie, I do ship them, even though he is arguably her great uncle. Weird, very weird. But anyway, though, then we flash over to Balto, who is very sad because Ariel belittled the work of him and his people, and he just feels so utterly useless. But he does manage to create a peace treaty with humanity, and together they attack the labyrinth. So good for him! Unfortunately, it is a freaking massacre, and a lot of people die, including Kogu and his troops, who stay behind to cover everyone's retreat. Sad, but this is ultimately for the greater good. And speaking of sad, we then flash over to Sophia, who has completely and fully forgotten about Sir Wald. Seriously, this man gave up literally everything for her, and she actually forgot about his existence. Holy Mother of God. But anyway, though, then the ancient war dragon Yana tries to flood the labyrinth by punching a hole into it from the ocean. And this girl is crazy strong, with stats around 25,000, making her arguably the strongest ancient dragon. But she's not a great match for Sophia, since all of her water attacks just end up getting frozen. But this also means that Sophia can't really finish the fight, and that's a major problem since 37 other ancient war dragons are also flooding the labyrinth. Yeah, it turns out you need a lot of war dragons to keep people from sailing off the edge of the world. I kid you not. But anyway, though, then Wrath pops over and kills her in one blow, using his Wrath skill to max out his stats to 99,999. Though, even with all of his training and unlocking Heresy Nullification, he still almost loses control, showing just how insanely dangerous the Wrath skill really is. But before Yana dies, she sacrifices her soul to the system so that she will never again be reborn, with Wrath commenting that he plans to do the same thing once the war is over, as that is his only means of atoning. Then Kusamba the ninja briefly fights against the 10th Army to protect the Pontiff's tent, even though the Pontiff isn't actually there, which is kind of pointless, but he didn't run away, so that's character growth, I guess. I don't know. Meanwhile, the 10th Army are still fully loyal to White, even though doing so means betraying demonkind, because as one soldier puts it, White took us in when the rest of the world abandoned us. We would gladly lay down our lives to serve her. God, I love it. I absolutely freaking love it. I mean, it's just great to see there are people who really do appreciate White and the effort she put into saving the world. Even if saving the world was just a side effect of her attempts to save Sariel. Either way, still love it. Then we have Mira, who starts the chapter complaining that the world is deeply unfair, before bracing himself to face off against Asuka and Kuniko, knowing that he can no longer hold back, and thus must kill them. But before the fight can even begin, Asuka knocks Kuniko out and drags him away because she absolutely knows that if she tried to fight Mira, she would die. They would die almost instantly. And this absolutely makes sense for her character because she's made it abundantly clear that she hates fighting and just wants to live a peaceful life with Kuniko. So she just drags him away, with Mira wishing them a happy life together. Oh, I love it. And later on, when Kuniko wakes up, he realizes, oh, I almost got us killed, didn't I? So he apologizes and promises to spend the rest of her life with her until they eventually die of old age, surrounded by their grandkids. A rather sudden but certainly appropriate ending for the two of them. Huzzah! Meanwhile, Miss Oka is still kind of struggling with the fact that she offered up her students to an insane nut job who was planning on turning them into a soul smoothie. And as a result, she is just fully and completely helpless when the UFO they're on gets attacked by a swarm of monsters. At least until she sees Huiven'S and Anna being attacked, and she remembers, wait a second, I am a crazy strong mage, and she leaps into battle, saving the day and impressing her students. Though I gotta say, I'm a bit disappointed this wasn't, a full chapter from the students' perspective of seeing her being cool, realizing how hard she's fought for them, and having them improve their opinion of her at least a little bit. But anyway, though, then Huiven'S gets on board and flies the UFO to safety, raising certain questions like, why can you fly UFO, and who the freak are you? And he tells them everything about him and Black, and I'm also disappointed that this wasn't a bigger scene. Even later on, when Shun finds out, it is pretty quickly brushed aside. I mean, come on, Shun. This is a man you consider to be your brother, and he fully had a hand in murdering your actual brother. That should be a freaking conversation. Though it is also true that I definitely misunderstood exactly what Huiven'S was. I assumed he was, a puppet, much like White's mini-me's, but if that was the case, he would have shut down when Black started fighting White. Instead, he describes himself as a normal human with memories of his past life as a god. And not even a lot of memories, just like bits and pieces here and there. So he really is, a fully separate person from Black. He even says that he's not siding with Black. Though as it turns out, siding with anyone here is a very bad idea, since Miss Oka's student roster skill tells her the evil god D rings the final bell of judgment. Evil god D will exterminate half of humanity, meaning that regardless of who wins this war, half humanity will still die, which does actually make sense. Humanity sacrificing God to save themselves is how they got into this mess in the first place, and them doing it a second time just means they didn't learn their lesson and must be punished. And when Shun arrives and learns this, he decides they should all go talk to D. Yes, Shun, I'm sure that'll work out great for you. Though this is something that Elder Ronan thinks might be kinda possible, much like how he teleported to Shun through Faye, something which even White said was fully and completely impossible. Oh, there's also this great moment here when Shun showed Miss Oka the spider that teleported him to the island, and she is obsessed with its cuteness. Oh my god, I freaking love her, and I'm actually really bummed we didn't get more scenes of her interacting with white spiders. But anyway, though, then Ariel spends an entire chapter being insanely paranoid because only 3 ancient dragon chiefs are attacking her, and there should still be 6 in play. But despite her fears, she still manages to kill the fire and lightning dragon chiefs, though before she does, they also offer themselves up to the system. And the puppet spiders do end up losing their puppet bodies that White made for them, which, is actually very sad, but still, she's won. Victory is hers. Huzzah! At least until Ogiwara puts her in a group chat with basically every other relevant character, and they all ask to be let into the system's core so they can teleport to D. Of course, they could also stop White's plan if they reach the core, so Ariel repeatedly tells them to buzz off before ultimately giving in since she wants to talk to D as well. And we then get a chapter with a very frustrated tyrant who complains about wiping the root of all evil, about foreigners of the world outnumbering natives on this mission to save the world, about riding on spider taxis, about Sue somehow sneaking aboard this trip, and about all the girls fighting over Shun while the fate of the world literally hangs in the balance. But he does manage to give Miss Oka a pep talk about pushing forward. But when he tries to do the same for Hugo, it doesn't go great, with Hugo basically saying that he knows what it's like to be past the best years of your life and have no way of going back, just like Black. For Hugo, I'm guessing he's thinking of his time in Japan, and Black's thinking of his time at the orphanage with Serial and Ariel. They then reach the bottom stratum, and Elder Ronan is absolutely shocked to learn that the little girls he played with back in the Elf Village are in fact tiny itty-bitty spiders, with Ariel describing them losing their puppet bodies as having their favorite outfit get burned up in battle. Oh my god, that is absolutely freaking adorable. I love the puppet spiders. I so love them. Balto also steps up to ask what Ariel thought of Demonkind, and she is just fully and completely honest, saying she doesn't care about them at all, but she is grateful to Balto for everything he did for her, and this gives him, a tiny bit of closure, which is nice, since he is literally useless for the rest of this volume. Seriously, even the Pontiff does better in this fight than him. I really feel like they could have had this moment over the phone, and then just left him behind, just saying. Oh, and then Ariel gives Shun the sword of the hero, which she had for some reason, and wakes up the ancient light dragon in it who's been pouting ever since Julius, his favorite hero, died. And then they all teleport to a black void where D is waiting for them, revealing that she is in fact Hero Wakaba. And Faye is not at all surprised to learn this, given that she was truly obsessed with and terrified of Wakaba, viewing her quite accurately as some alien godlike being, and hoping that some prank or jab would get her to drop the mask and act human for once, but she didn't because she wasn't. She was just as Faye always feared, and when she first met White in the New World, she didn't feel that same fear, so she knew immediately that it wasn't actually her. Ariel, meanwhile, has a pretty similar reaction, basically just going, oh, okay, because she's known probably since Volume 6 that something was off. There was this weird disconnect between the memory she had of Hiro Wakaba and how White acted that she was never really able to understand until that moment. But she doesn't care, White is still White to her. Though I guess it is wrong to say she doesn't care, she does. In fact, she actually thanks Dee for bringing White into her life. She is truly grateful for not only the help that White has offered, but also for the chance to experience having a granddaughter as wonderful as White is. Oh my god, this is just such a truly heartwarming moment, and I loved it so freaking much. Anyway, though, then Dee gives a basic explanation of what happened and why they all died, and Faye asks to punch her. Which just, wow, seriously, this girl is completely and utterly fearless. Though she does certainly have a point, Dee explains that she could have very easily revived everyone instead of doing this whole, reincarnation thing, but it was just too much of a hassle for her. God, Dee sucks. And as for this entire world and the system, it was all just a game for her, one in which she was trying to create a god. The system was like training wheels, and moving beyond its limitations could allow one to theoretically become a god. And she actually had a lot of hope for both Pontiff'S and Ariel, but for whatever reason, they just couldn't cross that threshold. Though I do strongly believe that Elder Ronan could have managed if he just had a bit more time. I mean, managed to teleport to Shun through Faye. That's not possible. Even White said that was not possible. So Ronan was certainly on the way to becoming a god. Interesting. Oh, and God above. Speaking of gods, then in one of the best moments of this volume, Dee tries to explain that White was just a spider she put her memories into, and it broke them. It fully and completely broke every person there, to the point where Shun just assumed she was choking. Oh my god, I love it. Anyway, though, then Dee decides to reward everyone for managing to amuse her by making them a deal. If they can beat her in a fight while she's holding back as much as possible, she'll save the world without killing anybody. And to entice Ariel to join in, she even promises to revive Serial, though she'll only live as long as Ariel will, so probably less than a year, but, that's enough to convince her. That's certainly better than, the 30 seconds she would have gotten saving Serial the normal way. Though the fight falls apart for them literally immediately, as Dee kills Huiven'S in one blow, and announces that all of her stats are around 150,000, while she's holding back as much as possible. So yeah, they're kind of doomed. Completely and utterly doomed. Oh, I love it. But they don't give up, and they all quickly find a role to play in this fight. Shun uses Mercy to revive Huiven'S, and promises to use it on anybody else who dies, even though using Mercy damages his very soul and could kill him. And the Light Dragon in Shun's sword decides to boost Sue for some reason. I guess because she's loyal to his chosen master, which is certainly weird, but it puts her stats well above 10,000, making her crazy strong. Katya then uses her unique skill Conversion, which is a seriously perfect skill for a gamer, allowing her to convert all of her skills into skill points so she can respec herself whenever she wants. Unfortunately, it gets less efficient with each use, so she's never actually used it before, but now she does, sacrificing all of her skills so she can get the ruler class skill Chastity, which creates crazy strong barriers that even Dee would struggle to break in her weakened state. Miss Oka then uses her charity skill to give an insane regen ability to everyone she considers an ally, making them almost unkillable. Ariel summons her last two queen spiders, each of whom summon their own army of spiders, and finally Huiven'S summons Huiven, Nia, and Reese, with Reese really being the most useful person in this fight. Yeah, it turns out the Dragon Chiefs were actually chimeras created by Pontiff'S, which was pretty heavily shouted in the past. Reese called Ariel their sister, and Ariel said there were more chimeras besides the orphans that she didn't meet until much later. And also now she's realizing that Miss Oka is also technically Ariel's sister. Weird. Very weird, family tree here. But regardless, unlike the orphans, the dragons were deemed as monsters by the system and were taken in by Black to put them to work protecting different aspects of the world, with Reese being put in charge of guarding the sword of the Demon Lord. A rather pointless job, so Reese decided to devote almost all of their skill points into heresy, rot, and abyss magic, as these are the only elements that could actually hurt a god, and Reese wanted to prepare for an invasion by a foreign god, even if there was basically no chance of that happening. But now, those seemingly useless skills prove incredibly useful, as Dee is actually avoiding Reese's attacks while ignoring everyone else's, making Reese their main attacker. And after everyone uses up their secondary ruler class abilities to stun Dee, Reese is actually able to hit her with Abyss Magic, which Shun quickly follows up on by using the Sword of the Hero, a sword designed to kill an actual god, and it does absolutely freaking nothing. Or at least it does so little that Dee isn't even freaking fazed by it. Holy Mother of God. So Ariel decides to fight, even though she can barely stand, and she knows that using humility even one more time will undoubtedly destroy her soul, but she's still willing to fight for the sake of saving Sariel, so she says goodbye to the puppet spiders, and declares that her only regret is not being able to say goodbye to White. Only for White to fly in and repeatedly stab Dee in the face. Oh, I freaking love it. Yeah, as it turns out, White was watching all this happen through the spider she dropped on Shun's head, and she then proceeds to recap the entire volume and complain about how stupid and unbelievable it all was, before eventually calling a truce with Black. Though due to her speech issues, this takes a really freaking long time, and annoys her so much that she teleports over to Dee and repeatedly stabs her in the face with her scythe until Dee gets annoyed and gives up. Huzzah, I guess. Honestly, the mood in this scene was super awkward, as everyone was preparing to die against this insanely dangerous threat to having White teleport in and fix all of their problems in an instant. And while Dee complains the ending was sloppy, which I think might be a bit of self-criticism from the author, this certainly feels appropriate to me. White has always had backup plans in place, and there's no way she'd leave her friends completely alone, so of course she'd find a way to keep an eye on them in case things went bad, which they did. Very, very bad, very fast. And speaking of fast, we then get a very rushed goodbye as everyone teleports away, except for White, who is now trapped forever as Dee's kin. Though White does get a chance to say goodbye and thank Ariel for everything, it's a really quick scene, but it's still so touching that White was able to speak that much as herself when surrounded by so many people. And then we get a weird chapter, Everyone's Ever After, and I could do a full video on this alone because it's just so freaking vague. Most of the complaints I saw online were about this part, as every character gets an ending, but they're all like 2 sentences, and most of them end with they were never seen again, or history doesn't recall. Like Shun says that history doesn't record who he ended up marrying, and Wrath said he just ended up disappearing. My best guess is the author either wanted the fans write their own endings, or he didn't want to box himself in so they'd be able to write a sequel down the road. And I'll talk about a few of these, but Wrath is the one I find most interesting. I mean, yes, he said earlier this volume that he sacrificed himself to the system, but the system's fine. It got all the energy it needed, so it'd be a pretty pointless sacrifice. As such, I like to believe that he found another purpose in life, maybe going back to the Mystic Mountains and finding Goblin Village to protect for the rest of his days. I mean, he said, his time in the Goblin Village making weapons and tools for them was the best time of his life, so I think that'd be very appropriate. And then we get the Pontiff'S, which is interesting, because it says he died shortly after the battle, but Dee said that she would dismantle the system very slowly, and therefore there could be some weird overlap here. It is entirely possible that the Pontiff died so quickly that he still had his skill that would allow him to reincarnate with his memories intact, meaning he could still be alive in this world, remembering everything that happened to him. And it may be a very, satisfying end for him, being able to live an ordinary life as an ordinary person without the need to atone, as he's had to do for his last, 50, 100,000 lives. I would really like that. Then we have Ariel, Mira, Sir Wald's, Ice Dragon Nia, and the Puppet Spiders, who apparently all moved to an ice castle in the far, far north beyond the reach of humanity. And this, makes a lot of sense, given they are all still vampires. The system didn't make them vampires. Vampires were a thing before the system, and that means they are, probably the strongest people in the entire world right now, and therefore it's probably best if they don't go, anywhere near humanity. Though I am curious where Wald and Mira are getting their blood from. Very curious. Oh yeah, and then Miss Oka reformed the elf village, filling with people who were like half-elves, quarter-elves, who were, prejudiced against because the elves were kind of created to destroy the entire world. Interesting. Anyway, though, then we get the true epilogue, which is a tea party between Dee and the maid guy we met before, with White serving them, while also dressed as a maid, because I guess that's Dee's fetish. Weird. And this chapter is so fascinating because it reveals that Dee did almost nothing in this entire series, or at least she did very little that required her own energy. The system was created by stealing the energy from the dragons who had already sucked the planet dry. Installing Taboo in everyone was done by stealing the energy that the former hero and demon lord stole from the planet to try and kill Black. So she's basically just been returning energy to where it belongs. And as for, actually saving the world at the end, that was most the result of Black and White pouring all the energy they could into the system, as well as the dragons sacrificing their souls, and the people of the world fighting for their lives in the world quest that Dee triggered. So the world was actually saved by its own people. Anyway, though, then Dee promises to train White to become as strong as possible before the maid asks what exactly White is, to which White responds, "So much spider, so what?" A perfect line to end the series on, though I do hope this isn't the end. I mean, like I said, the author left enough elements, the epilogue vague. They could definitely do a sequel, maybe the world's invaded by a foreign god, and Dee won't let White intervene. The after chapters did say that Elder Ronan had figured out how to cast magic without the system, so there is a lot of potential there, or even, a prequel, because I have a lot of questions about the start of the system and the rulers and all that. It's very curious, but overall, I love the series. It was a wild and chaotic ride, and I think it did a great job of telling stories on different scales, with White off being god and planning wars while her classmates were living a typical isekai life, and both managed to engage me, even though they were so wildly different. And if this is where the series ends, I'm okay with that. Though I don't believe this will be my last video, I am planning on making like a full timeline video in a few weeks. That'll be interesting. Ideally, I'd like to summarize everything in between like 10 and 20 minutes, but this is an insane story with a lot of moving parts, so I'll see what happens. But until then, peace!